The practice of consuming human flesh, known as cannibalism, has been documented in various cultures throughout history, often surrounded by ritual, tradition, and deep-seated beliefs. Among the most well-known examples of this practice are the indigenous tribes of Fiji and Papua New Guinea, where cannibalism was not merely an act of survival, but a complex cultural phenomenon intertwined with spirituality, warfare, and social structure. These tribes engaged in rituals that involved drying, seasoning, and consuming the dead, a practice that may seem horrifying to modern sensibilities, but held significant meaning within their societies. In Fiji, cannibalism was deeply rooted in both religious and social customs. The Fijians believed that consuming the flesh of their enemies granted them spiritual power, strength, and the ability to absorb the mana or life force of the deceased. It was not an act of random violence, but a carefully orchestrated ritual performed during warfare, funerary rites, and ceremonial occasions. When a warrior was killed in battle, his body was often taken back to the village, where it was prepared in a specific manner. The flesh was dried, sometimes smoked, and then seasoned with various herbs and spices before being consumed. This process was not just about nourishment, but about asserting dominance over enemies, honoring the gods, and ensuring the spiritual well-being of the tribe. The preparation of the bodies was meticulous. After death, the corpse would be dismembered, with certain parts reserved for high-ranking individuals or priests. The flesh was often cooked in underground ovens, known as lovo, where it was slow roasted with vegetables and aromatic leaves. In some cases, the bodies were preserved through drying, allowing the meat to be stored and consumed over time. The seasoning process was crucial, as it masked the taste of human flesh while also symbolizing the transformation of the enemy's spirit into something that could be controlled and utilized by the tribe. Papua New Guinea, particularly among the Fore people and other highland tribes, also had a history of ritual cannibalism, though with different motivations. Unlike the Fijians, who primarily consumed their enemies, the Fore people practiced endocannibalism, the eating of deceased relatives. This was done as a form of mourning and respect, as they believed that consuming the flesh of their loved ones would allow their spirits to live on within the community. The brains of the dead were particularly significant, often eaten by women and children during funeral rites. Tragically, this practice led to the spread of Kuru, a fatal prion disease that devastated entire villages before its connection to cannibalism was discovered. The psychological and social implications of these practices were profound. In Fiji, cannibalism reinforced tribal hierarchies and instilled fear in enemies. The mere reputation of being a cannibal tribe was enough to deter attacks from neighboring groups. In Papua New Guinea, the act of consuming the dead was a way to maintain a connection with ancestors and ensure the continuity of the community's spiritual lineage. Both cultures, despite their differences, viewed the consumption of human flesh as a sacred act rather than a barbaric one. European colonization and Christian missionary efforts played a significant role in the decline of these practices. As outsiders arrived in Fiji and Papua New Guinea, they brought with them new religious beliefs, laws, and moral frameworks that condemned cannibalism. Many tribes were forced to abandon their traditions under threat of punishment or through gradual cultural assimilation. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the practice had largely disappeared, surviving only in fragmented oral histories and the occasional archaeological discovery. Today, the legacy of these cannibalistic tribes remains a subject of fascination and horror. Anthropologists continue to study the cultural and psychological factors that drove these practices, while modern descendants of these tribes often view their ancestors' customs with a mix of pride and discomfort. The dried and seasoned flesh of enemies or loved ones may no longer be part of their rituals, but the stories endure, reminding us of the vast and sometimes unsettling diversity of human belief systems. The question of why these tribes engaged in such practices cannot be answered simply. It was not mere savagery, but a complex interplay of spirituality, power dynamics, and cultural identity. In a world without modern medicine or science, consuming the dead may have been a way to harness their strength or keep their memory alive. For warriors, it was a way to demonstrate dominance. For mourners, a way to cope with loss. The drying and seasoning of the bodies were not just culinary techniques, but symbolic acts, transforming death into something that could be controlled, understood, and, in some ways, conquered. While the idea of eating human flesh is abhorrent to most people today, it is important to approach these historical practices with cultural relativism. What seems grotesque in one context may have been sacred in another. The cannibal tribes of Fiji and Papua New Guinea were not mindless monsters, but people whose traditions reflected their understanding of life, death, and the unseen forces that governed their world. Their rituals, though shocking, were a testament to the lengths humans will go to make sense of mortality and the unknown. As we examine these practices from a modern perspective, we must remember that every culture has its own taboos and traditions that may seem strange to outsiders. The consumption of the dead, whether as an act of war or love, was simply one of many ways in which human societies have sought to navigate the mysteries of existence. Though the ovens have long gone cold and the spices no longer mask the taste of human flesh, the stories of these tribes remain, challenging us to confront the boundaries of our own understanding and the depths of human cultural diversity. In the end, the cannibal tribes of Fiji and Papua New Guinea serve as a stark reminder of how differently societies can interpret life, death, and what it means to be human. Their practices, though no longer in existence, force us to question our assumptions about morality, tradition, and the thin line between reverence and revulsion. The dried and seasoned bodies of their dead were more than just meals. They were symbols of power, vessels of memory, and, in their own way, a profound expression of what it meant to be part of a community bound by beliefs that the modern world may never fully comprehend.